Hi everyone, welcome to the Fractional DevRel podcast. I am your host, Jason Koo, and today I'm super honored to have the Guy Royse on our show today, and he's going to tell us all about how to craft like the most amazing presentations so you connect best with your audiences. Guy, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know that anyone's introduced me as the Guy Royse.
Well, you know, don't want anyone to confuse you with a different guy. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this, actually.
You should feel honored because I feel blessed to have you on the show because I've been a huge fan of yours since I saw your Dungeons and Dragons and Graphs talk. This was a number of years ago, back when Redis still had Redis Graph. Yeah, and I still, to this day, think that is one of the best introductions to graph databases. So, like, if anybody's listening and you're like, graph database, what is a graph? Like, go check out Guy's presentation because I feel like it's spot on, especially if you're someone coming from a relational database background. It's a great segue into like, oh, this is a situation or these type of situations is where I should use a graph. So,
it was,
okay.
That talk was a ton of fun to do, and just theming it and everything. And it was actually the thing that really surprised me about giving that talk is how many people came into it thinking that it was about GraphQL.
Yeah.
And so I actually would sometimes put a little thing in there as like, okay, this is graph databases, not GraphQL. And because graph databases just weren't, and I think still aren't all that well established in like the broad developer community's mind. And so I like to think that I helped a little bit with that. So, but that was a ton of fun to give. And I remember making very specific choices when I built the slide deck for that as well, which is probably on topic for the topic of our conversation today, isn't it? What do you say?
Yes. No. Yeah. Yeah. Would love to dive into that.
So I did a few things. So I always try to kind of come up with like my visual language when I'm building slides. I'm not like a designer. I don't have any design training or anything, but there were two things that I really wanted to do. I wanted to color code everything. So you have these graph entities that were, each node in the graph has a label. So you had monsters, you had treasure, you had dungeon rooms. And so they had a label, but I color coded them as well. And I made the treasure kind of golden colored, and I made the monsters kind of red colored because treasure's gold and monsters are dangerous. And then the rooms were gray because they were stone, like in a dungeon. And I maintained that color theme throughout the entire presentation in my queries and all the things when I use those entities just to reinforce the idea, to reinforce those labels. The other thing that I did is I very deliberately didn't use a bunch of fantasy artwork. So because it's just so contrived, it's very easy to fill it up with a bunch of fantasy artwork. And this is pre-AI, so I could have made all kinds of AI-generated fantasy artwork. But instead, I took the physical objects of role-playing and used those as my icons. And so I had the little node that had the monster in it had a picture of a miniature. It was a little polished miniature that was red, actually. And the treasure was a little pile of treasure. It was actually a tabletop terrain item that I had crafted myself and took a photo of. But I used physical pictures of these things to make it more tangible. And I think it worked. It was a very conscious, deliberate decision to make it all photographs of gaming as opposed to pictures of what happens in the game, if that makes any sense.
Right. And would you do that again? If you had to remake that talk, would you go with like the physical photographs, or would you now use, say, AI-generated images?
Honestly, I would probably... There was a window there where I may have used AI-generated images. I'm not like super opposed to using AI-generated images per se, but now I wouldn't because it would just be too obvious. And so I would still use photographs, I think. And I just went out and found open source free photographs that under Creative Commons licenses and that kind of stuff, and some photos that I took myself, and that's what I used. So, but yeah, that was a lot of fun to build and a lot of fun to give, and the abstract was fun to write. The only downside to the abstract was it was too long, and some Conferences were limiting the size, and it's hard to make it concise and get the punch and the fun that I wanted in the abstract. But, so that's a war story, right?
Talking about abstract, since you brought it up, like I think that part of the submission process is probably something that can hold quite a few people up, especially if they're new to giving presentations. What advice do you have for people to create like a really good, eye-catching abstract? So
I have one sort of quick line that I always use to explain how to think about abstracts for conferences. And the title is for the attendees, and the abstract is for the organizers. So we've all been that person at the conference, right? And you're like, oh, it's 3 o'clock. What's in the 3 o'clock slot here? Oh, title. Oh, that one looks fun. And then you go. And you don't look at the abstract at all. Occasionally people do, but most people don't. And so that means that your title has to set the proper expectation for that event, because that's all you can really expect an attendee to have read. And fitting, setting expectations and fitting that into a title is can be challenging, and it can take some time to come up with a good title. Sometimes they just smack you in the head, and you're just like, oh, that's a good title, and then you go with it. And other times you got to really think about it. The abstract, I tend to present problem in humorous fashion. Provide solution to problem, and then tell you what you'll learn and how you'll be different when you leave the talk. So I tend to have like three sections around that. Okay. And I always try to avoid the phrase in this session or in this talk or in this workshop, because everyone uses that all the time. It's a little bit of a cliche in a way. And so I try to come up with some other way to phrase it, because that's a really tempting way to do the third paragraph of the abstract.
The takeaway?
And so that's probably my advice. I fundamentally do, the topic matters too. And so I fundamentally do introductions with fun themes. That's really kind of my formula. And I do that because everyone says they want advanced talks, but no one attends higher level talks. Everyone attends introductory talks. And it's just, and conference organizers will tell you this as well. Everyone says, oh, we need more advanced talks. We need more advanced talks. And then they put them out there, and then it's like, oh yeah, 10 people showed up at a 2,000 person conference. People don't want, not enough people want them. Or they're too specialized that it fragments, and there's not enough people interested in the deep corners of things. And so I tend to focus on more introductory things with a fun theme, because the fun theme is the differentiator. It's the thing that gets me in the door. Like you could go to talk about graph databases, or you could go to talk about graph databases and Dungeons and Dragons. One of these is going to be more fun, right? Yeah.
Yeah. No, totally. Okay, so like on the advanced like talks and few people showing them, is that true even for like very specialized conferences that are like, say, like, I don't know, I'm just throwing out like knowledge graph conference, but like a conference where it's like, okay, we are focused on kind of advanced topics, but even those you would say kind of more focused on kind of introductory type talks?
Well, I would say introductory within the context of the audience at the event in the first place. So if you've got like a database or a conference that's all focused on graph, then an introduction to graph is not going to be necessary. That's going to be way too basic, probably. And so you might go down something a little more specific. And so you could go deeper in that, but that's because the conference is already kind of focused in a little bit on a thing. But for general developer conferences, well, it's general developers. So you want to get something that one of the things I like to think of is something that they can discover that they didn't know was there. Sometimes I'll do something like that. Or something they've heard about but they haven't spent the time to look at yet, because it hasn't been like, and so you can find little niches like that sometimes and do things that people aren't talking about. Like there's two ways to break through the crowd. One is you try and do something that no one else is talking about but there's interest in. Or you try to do something that is a little more common and throw a fun theme on it. And if you can do both, then that's magic, right? And then now you're talking about probabilistic data structures and UFOs, or you're talking about graph databases and Dungeons and Dragons, or you're talking about, I don't know, some third thing.
Actually, your probabilistic introduction or probabilistic data introduction with the UFO theme, I thought was also a great like pairing theme. How yeah, walk us through how you developed that talk.
Oh, geez. There's a couple. There's no good formula for this. It is just a little bit of crazy thoughts that go through your head, a little bit of ADHD, a little bit of too many interests and too many things, and sort of a sense of humor for an appreciation for the absurd. And someone who went out and got some data sets of UFO sightings and Bigfoot sightings and these sorts of things. And that data set, honestly, finding that data set was very helpful, because then it's like, what could I do with this? And then you start thinking of ideas. The probabilistic data structure talk specifically was the talk that they wanted me to do for my interview at Redis. So they had me do a presentation. And so I came up with this UFO spin on it and things it could be used for. And I was brand new to me, so I had to learn the thing and then build a talk around it. And it got me the job. Because before that, the hiring manager's manager was like, he'd interviewed me, but he didn't like me. And then he saw the talk and he's like, okay, we'll hire him. So that made the difference. Just doing something kind of fun and with a fun theme. And then I expanded that out into the talk that I have now. Okay. Added some X-Files references to it, and
Because you've been with Redis almost 7 years now, so
yeah, it's been a while.
So you've been doing this or variations of this UFO talk since then, or was this talk something that kind of reappeared or came back later?
Well, it's one of those talks that it's kind of a little bit evergreen, because it's just a data structure talk. And it's a data structure Redis has, and so it's relevant to Redis. And so I was able to, for several years, just be able to do it at different events that I hadn't given that talk at yet. And so I probably got a good 5 years out of that talk, honestly. It was, which is very unusual. Usually get a year, maybe 2 out of a talk. But yeah, I got... I mean, I guess there's a little bit of a lesson there, is if you can make evergreen stuff, then you can get more value out of your talk long term. You get more value from that investment.
For people on how to decide on, or how to get to creating like an evergreen piece of content.
I think you've got to go out and find, fundamentally you got to find the things in software that aren't changing, but that people also don't study as much. Like the probabilistic data structures is just kind of an odd. It doesn't fit into any track very well, really, at a conference. It's not something a lot of people have studied. Most people have heard of Bloom filters, or a lot of people have heard of Bloom filters as the main probabilistic data structure. But that's usually about where their knowledge stops. But there's a bunch more of them, and so they're like, well, this is kind of interesting. I don't know what this is, so it kind of grabs people. But it's also just computer science stuff. And so it gets that natural shelf life. Finding things like that can be a little challenging, because there's, and especially, I mean, if your job is developer relations, and lots of times you have to talk about the new hot thing. That's part of what you need to do. And so these sorts of talks can be a little more challenging in those sorts of environments. But I've seen some people do just general data structure talks. I think the graph databases talk is something that is fairly evergreen. If you don't understand property graph databases specifically, and want to learn about Cypher, then that's a talk that you can keep going back to. And so it's things that teach principles and things that are just move more slowly through the industry. So they're not chasing the new hotness; they are kind of slightly off from them. And then you get the advantage of you're not competing with as many people, but you also get that advantage of they can have a longer runtime. Okay.
And so, Guy, you've been on the opposite side for talks. You've also, what's quite the word? Not judge, but decided
on the selection
which talks
committee.
Yeah. On the selection committee.
Yeah.
So, from that angle, like, because a lot of people, I think right now, or a lot of DevRels are focused in the AI space, right? So, and a lot of technologies that pop up are like they come up really fast, but then this area is shifting so fast, right? So what advice would you have for DevRel who are working in the AI space, trying to present talks to conferences today?
Yeah, so that's kind of a tough question. So having looked at a lot of talks, what happens is you've got the new hot thing, and a lot of people either are choosing to talk about it because it's hot, or they've been instructed to, and you got to do something to stand out. That's really what it boils down to. Now, that could be reputation. So maybe you're already someone that's really you're an established speaker and people know what they're getting. That could make a difference. Themes can make a difference. Trying to make them a little more fun or a little more interesting, or an interesting angle on it. So, hey, this is how vector databases work or something like that. But here's some things about vector databases that maybe you haven't considered. Like if you can make it, and again, that's got to fit in the title. So the attendees, right? So that's not easy, but so you either need to be first, you need to have an interesting angle, or you need to be funny, right? That's really what it boils down to. And being first is hard. And so if you need to be in a crowded space, you either need to be funny or you need to have an interesting angle. I think that's really the main advice. Because I'll look through talks and it's like, well, we have 17 talks on topic du jour, and all but 3 are kind of samey. And so you like, well, these are all kind of samey, but I know them, and she's a really good speaker, so maybe. But this one looks interesting, and so a lot of them just get filtered out. So
okay,
and it's
so it's never like one thing, but
yeah. You got to stand out. You'll notice like some of the really well-known speakers have a look. Like they have some sort of effect that they have, like it's like they always wear this hat, or they kind of have a theme, right? Like I don't know if you know Dylan Beatty, but he has his hat, and he's sort of the rock and roll developer speaker person, and I kind of do that. I have the beard, right? I've taken on a physical appearance that makes me memorable, and that helps. Yeah. That there's something to that. And that can help it, having a personal brand, and that helps you get into events as well. And that just takes time, and you just got to put in the time. And 15-year overnight success. That's really what that is. Right?
So, like, my takeaway is, basically it's like a marathon, right? It's an endurance race. You don't do one shiny thing. It's you do you, and you do it for a long time, and people get to know you for that.
Yeah. And now I'm the bearded guy that looks vaguely Gandalf-like, who clearly wears suspenders and used to be a Linux sysadmin, and knows the deep arts because clearly I'm a wizard, and that's sort of how everyone perceives me, and does with these really weird and unusual or esoteric or very deeply technical talks. So let's get in and how does a probabilistic data structure work, or I'll explain something that seems hard in a way that's simple.
Yes.
Like I did with graph databases, or like I've done with vector databases. You get that, you pull that thread out of it, that you get into the point where it's like, I understand this intuitively, and there's this really simple intuition that makes sense, and you explain that. And that just takes learning the thing and finding that sort of just obvious thread that you can share. So like with vector databases, they're just a vector is just a point in a multi-dimensional space, and so you can graph it on with an axis, and there's a point and there's a point, and the closer they are, the more similar they are, and the further apart they are, the less similar they are. That's vector databases. And once you have that intuition, all of it makes sense, and then you can just build on that intuition. So I try to pull those things out as well.
Right. So is that what you're crafting your stories to do, is to bring people to that same intuition, that same sort of aha moment?
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly what I'm trying to do. With graph databases, it's like okay, let's compare a known thing to something else and then build on it over time. And then all of a sudden you're there. I showed you a tree and I showed you more trees, and the next thing you know, you're seeing the forest. Other times it's here's the big idea that you need to get. Here is what a vector really is. And then from there, then once you have that intuition, then the rest of it just kind of falls out of it. And so I'm always looking for these things that people kind of know already, but don't know they know, or that are really easy to know. And I run them by my wife, actually, many times. Oh. I mean, she's not a slouch. She's got a math degree, but so I'll run these ideas past my wife and see if she understands them, because she's not really interested in any of this stuff, even though she has a math degree. She's not interested in a lot of the technology stuff. But if she can get her head around it, then that's my win condition. And then if I can make people laugh, that's the other win condition. Right?
Nice. I feel like you should, if there's like a DevRel like stand-up comedy circuit, I feel like you should totally be on that. Actually,
there is.
What? Really?
So some of the events I've been to, there's a thing called PubConf.
Okay.
And so and one of the rules is no recording, because people are going to say things that for funnies that perhaps their employers might not appreciate.
Right. That's good policy.
And I've done it a few times, and it turns out actual comedy is hard, and it takes
do you have any? So as you mentioned, comedy is not easy. Is there like one piece of advice you could give someone who is trying to add a comedic element to a talk or a presentation?
Sometimes, so the fun theme in itself can be a source of comedy. And so I'll inject humor into my abstract. So I had a talk that I did called Deep Learning Like a Viking. And it was, so if you're familiar with the MNIST Keras convolutional neural networks thing, where it's like, this is image classification, classified in digits 0 through 9. It's sort of like a hello world for convolutional neural networks that people aren't doing anymore, because we have LLMs and all these other things, and we're way past that. But it was something people were doing at the time. And so I replaced the numbers with Viking runes, which there are 16 of. And in my abstract, it starts out with, the Vikings came from the land of the ice and snow, with the midnight sun where the hot springs flow. And so I'm just immediately quoting Led Zeppelin in a humorous way. And so just instilling a little bit of ridiculousness into it can be create humorous elements, because it's just sort of goofy and wonky and a little bit fun, and or intrinsically silly. So I like to do Bigfoot themed things, and Bigfoot's funny, just because. I mean, I hope you're not a Bigfoot believer, but because there's just some jokes you could make there, right? Like I have a joke that I do where I talk about how I'm trying to find Bigfoot and all this stuff, and this is talking about Redis search, and I was going to use Redis search to find Bigfoot, and then I have a confession that I've really been into Bigfoot and I pan to a slide, and it's 2 Polaroids of myself and Bigfoot, and I say Bigfoot was my father. No. Right. And no one's expecting it. It always gets a laugh.
Yeah.
And so you can do things like that are surprising. Like, as I understand it, the essence of comedy is you're taking someone down a path in a story, and they think they know where the story is going, and then you turn right or you turn left, and it does something they don't expect. And you can get that with a slight level of inappropriateness sometimes, like in my probabilistic data structures talk, I make a joke about some of the UFO sightings where these guys were probably high, which no one's expecting me to say at a tech conference on stage. But it's not particularly risky to say, And so it's little things like that. But just having that fun theme, or that with a little bit of ridiculousness of it, brings in that humorous element, just sort of intrinsically. And
okay. Nice.
So lots and lots of examples more than anything, but
yeah, but it tells like where people I think should start, right? Which is, at least my takeaway was like, start with like the general theme and the title, and it kind of, the jokes and the comedy and the lightheartedness just kind of falls into place from there.
Yeah. And lots of times what it is like I'm looking at a technology and thinking, what silly thing could I use this for? So, like convolutional neural networks, no one's using them to decipher Viking runes. That's kind of silly, and but it made it a little more fun. And the challenge you can run into sometimes is that it's like, well, this talk is not aligned with this vertical. So I hear that sometimes. It's like, well, we want to talk that aligns to the banking vertical. It's like, I actually think that's, I don't want to say dumb, but I'm going to say dumb. Because developers are smart, and they can draw the line from, he detected Viking runes using a neural network, to actual application where they need to detect more sophisticated things as part of their job function. Right. The developers are smart enough to draw that line, and so if you can provide that entertainment, they're more engaged, and they learn more, and then they run with it. They do something, and so I don't worry about things like which vertical, or we need a banking example, or we need a healthcare example, or we need a manufacturing example, because ultimately the technology just does what it does, and so the fun theme pays dividends because they can figure it out. They can apply it. Developers are smart. That's why we hire them.
So talking about like your past, since we kind of jumped around like your hobbies and like different points of your history. I mean, your rap sheet is amazing.
Funny you say rap sheet.
Yes. Walk me through your life and journey to DevRel, including the time that you spent teaching incarcerated students for a while.
Yeah. Well, DevRel just kind of, I was actually doing the thing with the students before I got into DevRel, but I was doing DevRel adjacent thing. And so I did a lot of that at a lot of different places. But at some point I started getting in, when I was working in insurance, I started getting into the conference scene. I was just like, this is really compelling to me. And I was attending, and I remember specifically I saw a friend of mine that I worked with give a talk at Code Mash. And in my brain, I was thinking all the people who got on stage were like special and like some other, like they're from companies and stuff like that. And then I saw my friend Dave get up there, and I'm like, well, just everyone does this. This is just normal people. And I'm like, well, I could do that. And so I did. And so I started speaking at meetups and small things at work. And then I started organizing, took over the JavaScript meetup here in Columbus, Ohio, where I live. And just started doing these things. And then when my time at that insurance company, I said I live in Columbus, Ohio, and I worked for an insurance company. You can guess which one. It's on LinkedIn. It's not a secret. It was nationwide. But they, I wasn't really, they didn't care about me going to events. It doesn't help Nationwide sell insurance if I'm going to a conference and saying, hey, I'm Guy, I work for Nationwide, and here's a really cool thing that I learned and I want to share it with you. And so I went into consulting and joined a consulting company, and they got more value out of that. But I also wasn't billing when I was doing that. So it was a little bit of harder, but I went into that to sort of widen my sphere. And when I was there, I was speaking when I could, just because I enjoyed it. I liked getting out and talking to people and sharing and learning, and I just like to teach, really, is what it is. And someone recruited me into DevRel. It hadn't even occurred to me that I could realistically take that job because I've got a family, and I was doing Cub Scouts. I was a Cub Master for my boys, but that had wrapped up, and someone reached out to me and said, well, what about this guy? He's local, and he's speaking at a bunch of things. And the story I heard is the CEO, this is like a 17-person startup, goes into the engineering room, and the room where everyone's just kind of at tables coding together, and says, anyone here know Guy Royse? And 6 people raised their hand out of like the 8 people that were in the room. And so that's how I got that job. I mean, they interviewed me and did their due diligence and stuff, but their head of engineering was someone that I worked with at Nationwide, and so it was just so there's just some connections there, but a lot of people knew who I was, and then from there I started growing my speaking, and then they got acquired by Data Robot, and we had deeper pockets, and so I started speaking internationally, and the trick to speaking internationally is you just have to go there. They're not any harder to get into than anything in the U.S. You just have to be willing to get to Europe. And if you've got a company that will pay for that, then take advantage of it. And I did. And then I left Data Robot to join Redis, and just been kind of trying to grow my craft ever since. But I didn't talk about the prison thing. You can't not talk about the prison thing. That's the juiciest part. So when I was doing consulting, a buddy of mine, Dan, who he had been teaching Java at a prison in Marion, Ohio, and I met him shortly after I joined Redis, or after I joined that consulting company. Pillar was the name of it, and I'm like, this is pretty cool. I think I want to help. And he's like, well, you should come to a coding in the clink first. And do you remember the code camps? The code retreats. Sorry, code retreats. And there was the big international day of code retreat and all of that. The idea of a code retreat was everyone gets together and they would practice test-driven development, and they would have different constraints, and you would do like the game of life or something like that as a test-driven development sort of exercise. And so coding in the clink was one of these, where you spend a Saturday just every hour coming up with a different way of doing whatever this particular simple coding exercise was in prison. And so then the prisoners would all get to program with people from the outside. And so you meet all these very rather interesting people, actually. They have interesting stories that you don't hear all of for a while until you get to know them. Some of them are quite tragic, and some of them are quite unfair, and some of them are totally fair, but they're trying to make the best of it as they can. And so I did that, and I get in there, and I'm like, this is really good. These guys, they don't have any internet, they just got some computers, they just have whatever that has been able to be brought into the prison to use to code, and they're doing Java because we knew that would be something that they would have, that there would be jobs for when they got out, whenever it was, because some of the guys were in there for 20 years. And so you get out, it's like, well, I guarantee you there's going to be jobs with Java in 20 years. Right? That was the thinking. And then I came in and started doing the JavaScript pieces as well, and brought more JavaScript to the table. So after doing that coding in the clink, then it's like, yeah, I'm gonna keep helping out with this. And so we'd go up there. I'd go up there every other week, and park at the prison, and then go through, and they'd search me and go through the metal detector. And it was a medium security prison, so it wasn't like, it wasn't that bad. But
no Hannibal Lecters.
No. And the guys that were part of the program were very protective of it. And so if anyone messed with you, they would, they made sure that didn't happen. And people didn't. Most people in prison, though, they probably shouldn't mess with outsiders. They'll get in a lot of trouble if they do. They did have one guy come up to me one time.
So if other people want to do something like this, because this sounds like a great program, is there an international organization, or is it just you just kind of have to find it kind of locally?
I just kind of stumbled upon it. There was an organization that came after Dan was doing his. I think Dan did one of the first ones, but he didn't make a lot of publicity about it. But there was a program called The Last Mile that was a little more public about it, and I think they did had pen pals, and they just did more promotional stuff. And then several of them got out. I mean, many of them have gotten out over the years, and I'm in contact with some of them. One even ended up working at Google. So,
for him.
I mean, some of them went back to prison. So, one of them even made this, And some of the things that take people to prison, they don't really overcome them when they're in prison and they find themselves there again. And some people find themselves there and they're like, okay, straight and narrow. And, there's some people that I sincerely believe were just unjustly incarcerated. But there's plenty of people there that totally deserve it. I mean, it's kind of a weird, there's a stark reality to it when you go into a prison where you realize you realize how few steps you would have to take to find yourself in there. And so it's very sobering. But I think it helped a few people out. So it was a good use of my time. And
I think that's great that I think if more people did things like this, to provide the opportunities for people who have, fallen, and to help them get back, because people are people, and a lot of us are is it victims of circumstance, I guess is the phrase for it.
The stories can be much more complex than people often think. And some of them are really straightforward, right? It's like, oh, I tried to rob a bank and now I'm in prison. That's what happens, right?
Yeah.
Others are like, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or it was in the heat of passion, or there's lots of stories, right? Mm-hmm. And but they're still humans, and they deserve redemption as much as anyone else. So.
How did Dan get started? Did he just walk up to the prison warden and was like, "Hey, I got a proposition"?
I'm not exactly sure, honestly. He's never told me that story. But yeah, I don't actually have good advice on how to start something like this, because I just sort of rode the coattails of someone else.
Yeah. But I think you've touched on what that door looks like, right? I think if somebody's interested in doing something like this, is to just reach out to an existing language exchange or some sort of program that already exists with the prison system. Go talk to them.
Yeah, because there's going to be stuff around that. There's going to be stuff around the trades, because they're teaching welding and stuff like that too. And two years like that'd probably be the way to get in. What I will not recommend doing is walking up to the prison and going up to the front gate and asking. You won't get in trouble for doing that. You go there and they're just not going to let you in. They're like, I don't know what, and you could probably even call the warden of the prison and just ask and see if you can get some other time. And because I know that Dan had called the warden in the past, because he knew he had a relationship with him. So,
Guy, thank you for your time. I just want to end the episode with a question I'd like to ask everyone, which is, who else in DevRel do you respect and would totally recommend other people listen and follow?
So, I probably should have prepared an answer for this question. So I did mention one person that he's not in DevRel per se, but he very much is in the speaking circuit, and it's Dylan Beatty. He's got a formula down where he does interesting talks. He kind of does similar things to what I do, but he's a little more polished at it than I am. I tend to just get an idea and get on stage and sort of Robin Williams it, whereas he actually writes out a script that he reads, but he's able to do it in a very effective fashion. He's really good at his personal brand. He's really good at talking about things that everyone's not talking about. And so if you want to get into speaking and learn some tricks, he's a good guy to learn from, watching what he does. The only thing that doesn't help you in DevRel specifically is he's just a consultant that's kind of talking about the things he feels like. And so if you want to actually get into DevRel specifically, a lot of that is just going out there and doing the legwork. But there's a lot to learn from Dylan. I really like him. I think I'm going to go with Dylan. He's got some pretty serious chops. He even did PubConf. So.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, he's very technical, and he does consulting work, to pay his bills. And so I have a lot of respect for Dylan.
Okay, no, that's a great recommendation. And consultancy is also part of fractional DevRel, so that's, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, thank you, Guy. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.